So in UCD, our largest teaching lab takes about 60 students. I think it's thereabouts. So what we have to do is we book 3 labs at a time. We kind of work it out what rooms we need, and we run the sessions. They weren't run simultaneously. They're run, the students sign up separately for the labs and they run them. But it is very difficult logistically to get the rooms to start and to get them at a time when all the students can attend, because they're all on different timetables, some of the elective students. But even though it's difficult, I think it was worth doing. I've no doubt whatsoever in my mind that we had to do that. But it is changing now because, as I said, I am more confident about using a BYOD approach, that tell them to bring their laptops to class, bring their tablets, bring whatever they have, and we can do work in class in a lecture theatre because the Wi-Fi is now stable and they have their own devices. So I'm moving towards that. Now we did have a laptop cart as well. I use that with my postgrads. That kind of works to some extent, but you don't have as much, you don't have enough computers with that. So, but yeah, I mean, that's how we did. That's how we ran the labs. But as I say, I'm moving towards a in lecture theatre experience now. We'll see how that goes. Second question again, just to remind me, was the e-resources.
The volume of time it takes in providing putting together the resources,
yeah.
Providing them. Is it you or is it them?
Okay. Do you mean the e-tutorials that we, specifically the e-tutorials? We absolutely have them, we get them created in collaboration with, for example, we had some money available last year, so we hired a student to create them. This year, we have our capstone group working on new ones. So there's absolutely no way we would do it by ourselves. That it is always going to be a collaborative effort because we don't have time, and also because we don't always have the requisite expertise to do a good job. So that's how we're doing that.
Can I just put one point to you that I'm finding? Bring your own price sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
My problem is that I'm finding more of my students now are not even getting into our electronic learning environment because they're being able to pay fees and there's huge stresses on them.
Yeah.
And so to suddenly tell them to bring their laptop, bring their smartphone, whatever, it's pushing out a sector that are already disadvantaged and telling them, well, don't come today.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And what I have been doing is I get the students to work in groups. Like we don't have sessions where everybody's beavering away themselves. It's always a group effort. So usually the little groups of 3 or 4 or whatever it is, they have one device between them perhaps. So that's one way of alleviating that. But I would absolutely, I said I'm getting more confident, but I would never be 100% confident to use that approach for the reason that you state, that not everybody actually has access to devices. So yeah, it is definitely something I consider.
Thanks, Claire. Let's take Brian's question.
Sorry, thanks very much. I don't want to hold you up. Brian Gillespie, Dublin Institute of Technology. 2 very engaging and useful talk. But if I could just ask Claire something, and I borrow your better knowledge in this, but I worry about when you talked about best practice. I actually would think that it might be better to be called that best theory, because there's a lot of things in there you're talking about that we try and do, like measurable outcomes, and we're not sure how to do it. And things like assessment and collaboration are very patchy on the ground, and they're sort of rely on getting lecturers to actually engage with it. And while we'd like to do all those things, they don't often happen. And I just wonder if there's also, like, we're all, we're committed to the cause, but I think there's a lack of academic, institutional, and even in library management of buy-in to the idea and the need for the information literacy. And why they talk about it, I don't actually think it's happening as much as we'd like to. That's why I think it's in theory more than practice. And I like what was going on in Andrew, where you think about how you're going to sort of do that. And we have to, and 3 things I think are really important. It would be, one would be the whole area of graduate attributes, the sole thing of teaching and learning, this guy, this forum, and also the employers thing, is that's what's going to win hearts and minds on it. I don't know if you want to comment or whether you talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you about best practices. It's something to aspire to, but I think our experience on the ground is always going to be somewhat less than what's on the screen. And also about being able to sell and getting buy-in. That's as long as I've been researching information literacy, that has been the key issue. how to get the word out, how to get academics on board, how to get administration on board. And all we can do is try and push as best we can. But yeah.
In Maynooth, we just undergone a curriculum commission review where we looked at exactly that. Could you introduce something, say, in first year or the first semester of first year that would introduce all the key skills that we're talking about here today that we feel students need for learning, and set them up, if you like, before they really get into their discipline in ways that they understand and have the skills that they didn't have an opportunity necessarily to learn before. And it's something that Maynooth has spent about the last 2 years considering what could we do to that regard. And some of our courses that we would have taught in a very traditional way are now going to start looking at integrating that sort of a model where you could do other additional things at the start in first year to help you transition more effectively into third level education. I think there could be really interesting work to be done in that area.
Often it's hard to tell a student, certainly as they get further up anyway, for me it's hard to tell a student, you know, your grammar's terrible, you really need to work on that. But the dialogue that we start to have in the classroom, where we start to share, at least, let's be honest, about, you know, your literacy skills, these are the skills that you're going to need to develop into a useful person in society. If you start that early on, so it doesn't come as such a shock, you know, so they're not submitting their first report and you're putting a red mark through everything, or, you know, that really does help them. There's got to be some kind of dialogue with them, an honest dialogue. Now at second level it would be probably a different dialogue than at third level. At third level we're expecting them to be independent, we're expecting them to identify that themselves. At second level it's much more guided, I would imagine. But I still think this idea, you know, if that's done early, so at first year they're not just learning, I mean my kids are primary school, so they're going through, you know, they've learned to read. As far as I know, I can't see where they're learning to discuss and argue and to look at themselves and see, well, oh no, I'm not so sure. Now they're only 7, so I'm being a bit hard. But I'm serious in a way that where in the classroom, from primary to secondary, are they being taught to sit back and say, well, oh, hold on a minute. No, that's not the way I was taught. Maybe I should improve that. They're not taught that, I don't think. So they're certainly not used to it when they come into third level.
And just something you said, I used to teach in Germany and Switzerland, and I found the same thing that you said, that they were amazing for when it came to discussion, opinions, just totally engaged with their subjects, and from the time they were really quite young. But I find it really just so different in Ireland, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but just it seems to be the way that it is. How do you get around that? How do you try and really tease it out of them? Where I find students are really self-conscious. They're really like, oh God, there's like 10 people here, I'm not in them.
They are self-conscious, and they're not willing to maybe step above the parapet and open themselves up to what they might consider to be unfair criticism. But from the very first time they walk in the classroom, if we're using techniques where they end up being the person at the front, not me at the front, there's no point in me. Sorry, again, for lecturers who really do like this mode of learning, I'm not criticising it, I'm just saying for me, I would much rather be sitting there and the student up there, learning their way, tripping their way through the skills, and then helping them, giving them guidance on the way, than giving the talk to them that says this is how you should do it. I tried one subject at 4th year, now this is 4th year, and I had a group of students who I had for 4 hours a week for 12 weeks last semester, and I have to say 4 hours, you know, over 12 weeks is horrendous when you're giving a presentation to them. And the material I had was only in presentation form, so I didn't have a set of active skills that I could go through. In the end I said, no, stop. You're not listening to me. You're falling asleep at the desk. There's no point in me doing this. So it's from the weeks after I just said, right, okay, now I want you to, here's your question, or, you know, here's the topic that you're going to be studying. Here's a laptop. Here's the internet. You do the study that I'm doing to get the presentation up there, and you give me the presentation about what you think this topic is about. And that transformed the whole class. So for the last half of the lecture, they would give, the last half of the module, they would give me the lecture. Now it's too late at 4th year, so that's something I might then bring down into 1st year, but they're too used to us being at the front. You know, the hours and hours that we spend digesting like mother birds to regurgitate this stuff to them that they then have to remember to do an exam. It's pointless, because they have to do it.
Can I add one thing, which actually is better, but the continental education system, well, I know one is the German one. They're actually getting marks from the age of 8 to put up their hands and losing marks if they don't. So that's one of the reasons that by the time they get to third level, easier.
Yeah, it's possible.
Thing. So.
And they're discouraged from asking questions. The only thing I would say, one of the things I should have said, is this idea of why is reflection in there. I did a bit of research on if you have a habit, any habit, but a bad habit, maybe it's smoking or maybe it's overeating or whatever the habit is, it's actually been linked then to study. If you have a bad study habit, one of the best ways to try and root it out, to try and change your behaviour, to change that habit, because these are persistent habits, is to get them to reflect on what's going wrong, on why is this not working for you? Why is this a bad thing? Why is this not going to help you going forward? And what is it you need to be doing? And if they're doing that rather than me telling them that, it's much more likely that they'll ditch the bad habit and acquire a new habit. They're not spontaneously going to say, oh yeah, look, my writing's terrible, I'm going to go off and write better. They have to come to a realisation themselves that there's an issue, and then they have to deal with it. I can tell them all they like that their grammar's bad, but they're not going to correct that grammar unless they realise that this is damaging to their future progression. So that's why in Germany I think I don't know why they taught it, but the end result of that is that they're much more able to say, oh, do you know what, that's not working. I've got to try something else. Well, that's great that you showed me that skill. Like, all the stuff on the library, they're much more receptive to those online resources than the Irish guys, because they're looking for new skills. So, oh, a new skill, brilliant, thank you for teaching me a new skill. The Irish guys say, oh, not another one. But it's something you have to start doing quite early, and if you do it early and they're used to criticising themselves in a good way, constructively criticising themselves, that's much more important than any of those skills, because it gives them the routine to do that. I'll just tell you a story, or just two quotes. So, same student came into the class the last semester, the winter semester. About 4 weeks in, he was quite a disruptive student. He couldn't sit still. So, you're constant. Even not sitting still is a bad thing, even in an active classroom, because he was constantly moving around the place more than I would want him to move around. But he said to me, what is the point of this? You are taking 4 hours out of my week when I should be studying mechanics, mathematics, and blah, blah, whatever, okay? Yeah. And I was trying to say, look, these are skills that transcend this semester and will help you all the way through. We're trying to get them now so you realise the benefit. And he kept criticising me, and I'm sure it's the same in your classroom. Why are we wasting our time in this classroom doing this? Right, now, just middle of this semester, he came up to me and said, oh, Jerry, I'm really sorry for being like that. This is the best class that we have done, and it's so relevant to what we're now doing in second semester. They have to realise it themselves. They have to realise themselves that it's important. If they don't realise it themselves, we are always going to get resistance. So I'm kind of resigned to, the context thing helps a little bit, the active thing helps, but they still resist even at that, because they don't see, they're doing engineering, they're doing mathematics, really hard topics, and they come into our classes and they say, why am I wasting 4 hours when I could be revising for a test that I had on? But I said, because you're not going to get your job on your test necessarily, you're going to get your job on how well you speak, how well you present your project work, your literacy.
What was the most effective way that you came across? Did you learn it for yourself? Did you learn it from feedback you got from lecturers? How did you come up with the ability to take that information, synthesize it, compress it, and put it on paper, and use the right language? Do you think it's something you just developed yourselves, or do you think was it taught to you in some way, or did you get it from your peers? Where did it come from?
I think in my own experience anyway, it was a fairly gradual process. Like after I'd left school, if I was asked to do a lab report in first year, I'd probably look back at what I wrote then. Like if I looked at it now, and would probably cringe when I'd look at it. And I think it was really feedback from lecturers. So I know in particular, say in our department, Mark Connolly would get you to do a lab report, and he'd go through it and correct it, and he would literally then sit down with you afterwards. In fairness, he took this amount of time and actually went through the report with us and showed us where it was lacking, where it was good, and it was through that kind of process that you gradually built it up. But I mean, where you develop the language skills and all like that is a more subtle kind of process, where how you learn the kind of language of the way people talk in the field kind of takes a while. And I can't even necessarily attribute that to one particular thing, but just the whole, I think lab reports would be kind of where the writing skills are developed, and then obviously your project being the big kind of documents that you also have to write. But it's the lab reports are the most kind of regular thing that you have to submit. I think that was from my own experience anyway. And I'm trying to think outside of that, you see there are probably other things as well that I'm even maybe forgetting, because it's a couple of years even at this stage since I'd have done it, but there were things like that Jerry as well would have done to again kind of improve kind of writing skills and language, and just simple things like how to structure sentences, and just how to kind of formulate your writing. Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. Would anybody else like to give some input?
For me, actually, Siobhan actually said it earlier on. It was actually a lecturer who gave us a previous A standard report that was written by a previous student. It was completely anonymous, and you know, we kind of based it on that, and that's kind of where I personally learned the language, the layout, all that sort of stuff. So it just made it a lot easier to go off an A standard, you know, report that had been done previous. So.
And that's unusual, isn't it, to see A standard stuff?
Yeah, yeah. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
So just you might not be able to answer this now, but tying into earlier questions in the session this morning about the reluctant students. I'm in DIT, and we do have a number of different information literacy services. But do you know from talking to your own peers, Michael, you mentioned earlier that you looked at the library tutors, but you know the rest of your class didn't. Do you know why they didn't? Do they say why? Is it because they don't know that they exist, or are they afraid to ask, or?
I don't really know. I think again it comes back to wanting to just be spoon-fed. You know, when they came in first year, they just expected that the lecturer was going to tell them this is what needs to be put in your report, this is what you need to write, and it's not done like that. You know, secondary school level, you were kind of given, you know, a piece of paper or whatever. It's a long time ago, but from what I can remember, you know, what you have to write is pretty much explained to you. You know, there's no research really to be done into it. Whereas when they came into third level education, it wasn't. And I suppose because I came back at an older age, I went to the library website, I watched the videos myself, whereas they kind of just wanted everyone else to say to them, well, you know, this is how you're going to cite, and this is how you're going to reference, and you know, and it wasn't like that. So I think that's why the Learning to Learn module was brought in then, to kind of make sure people did it, you know. So I think it's just wanting to be spoon-fed and wanting everyone else to do.
One of the ideas, well, it's the second question, it's an idea, it's essentially like we'd just be talking about academy among our colleagues. But one of the kind of problems we think about getting the information across about the services that are available, because we're trying all the different platforms, but it's not reaching some of the students. One of the problems we might think is that they see the library kind of as part of the establishment, that they don't come and ask us for help because they think we're like the lecturers, or we might don't have time for them, or we might be annoyed if they ask us a stupid question or whatever. So we're toying with the idea that we would work with the Students' Union, because we think they listen to the Students' Union, they see the Students' Union as one of their own, and that, do you think it would be a good idea to use the Student Union to promote library services in the student's voice?
I would highly recommend it. You know, I work very closely with Philip and Jill here. I would say we have a good relationship. Are you enjoying your free pens? You know, they are. We would highly recommend it. That link is essential. Anything that the library is publicising or anything, they always ask us, what do we think, and what do you think on this matter? Like, we've had numerous library committees, and they'll always turn around and say, oh, what do you think on this? How do you think students react to this? Will you do a survey in regards to this? So I would work very closely with the library services, and I would encourage any other college who is here today to contact your student union, because we're not better than anyone else, but students do feel they can talk to us. Sometimes they can't. Like Karen, our welfare officer sitting up there, she deals with a lot of personal issues, and sometimes students can't go to the counsellor here because maybe they're just not scared. Same way we were talking about just there before about student interaction and stuff, and students who aren't engaging, but maybe they're just afraid to put their hand up and ask a question in the middle of class, and that same student will go up to the end of the class and talk to the lecturer there in private because they just aren't comfortable in person. But to go back to the original point, is that I would encourage any library to get involved with the student union and then work both in tandem as a collaboration instead of two separate forces.
Just on that as well, I found certainly from our experience in the library, it's something about, you know, not being able to maybe put up your hand in the classroom situation and ask for help. That we get tons of queries, maybe at the information desk, the students coming up on a one-to-one level, saying, I'm really stuck, I don't know how to proceed with this, you know, academic question, I don't know where to post this, I don't know. And we might necessarily know, but it's just to have a listening voice and to just, sometimes it's almost like a counselling service in that respect, and it's having that one-to-one support and that friendly voice. But I certainly think to harness the Students' Union is an excellent way to go about it, and to have a presence maybe on various programme boards where you're getting that voice across and to communicate library services and to have that crossover in conversation with maybe somebody like the Students' Union that can leverage that conversation.
We do have like a meeting with the student youth group and stuff, but it's just as far as kind of promoting stuff. It's just the posters we put up, the emails we sent out, I think they just delete, they don't look. But if a poster from the Students' Union goes up, it's like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting.
Yeah, post on their Facebook pages if you can. I know there's that whole issue around are you invading their space, but it's whatever they're using the most, and if you can get a space on that, or post on that, that's one way to communicate.
I'd also like to add in to ensure that all the student support services are very closely aligned and they closely communicate, which is what we try to do here in Tala. You know, the various student support services are very, very close, and I think that's a really good thing because we don't know where the student's first point of contact is going to be, and then we know where to refer them to for the correct help.